The following story is, like almost everything I do, a memoir. But in this case, I'm going to call it a semi-memoir. It's called Oh Fairy Godmother. I really should not have done it. This was getting very awkward. There were just too many people there. My terror grew exponentially. This time I wondered if ego wouldn't be the death of me. I put myself between a rock and a hard place, and now any move would hurt. And it all started with just a simple desire to tell stories. You see, I always fancied myself as a storyteller. I tried stories out on children. I held their attention. Mostly. But to be honest, I didn't have much imagination, or I don't have much imagination, but I could plunder fairly efficiently the stories I had heard myself as a child. The adults styled me a natural storyteller. Jim, always on tap to pacify the kids before bedtime. Yes, man. But in my breast lurked the notion that I could, even with the least preparation, being a natural, hold a grown-up audience on a public platform. So, when one day I was approached by a publican who asked me to tell stories in his pub at Halloween, I jumped at it. I should add that, not insignificantly from my mental apprehension, the pub was in my hometown of, to preserve the innocent, we'll say, somewhere in Tipperary. Nerves began to get the better of me. More on this in a minute. I needed a drink, or three. And that's when I met him at the bar. He said he knew me. He growled, "You're Stevie's son, aren't you? Stevie from over the road." This was very much a statement rather than a question, but he immediately followed it with a question. "What are you telling stories about anyway, young fella? What do you have to tell us?" This stopped me dead in my tracks. I was fragile enough already, and a little bit of gentle ego massage would not have gone amiss. But instead, this full, frontal, in-your-face aggression. And heck, I was nearly 70. Young fella. How dare he, the feckin' bosthoon. And Stevie's son. My father had been in his grave for almost 40 years. Was I to be cursed ever to be known in this town by reference to my father? Not that that would have been an insult in any way. My father was, a well-liked, sociable man. You wouldn't cross him, though. The whole tone of your man at the bar was unsettling, hostile. He was putting me down. As I said already, the nerves were bad and getting worse. Massive stage fright a-brewing. There was too much expectation in the air. It was time for me to do my thing. Flee. But I was cut off at the pass. The publican asked me what I wanted. "It's on the house." Never one to turn a free drink down. "I'll have a Hennessy," I said, and wishing to punish him a bit for causing my predicament, "a double." The golden fire of the brandy was anchoring me temporarily. But I could well do without you, man, the vicious old codger. What was his game? I was beginning to lose it. I was getting angry. If he was younger, maybe if I was younger, I'd have hit him. But I was a little intrigued too, perhaps even somewhat mesmerised. He was definitely, from the ripe smells, a man of the countryside, and he had that air of solid personal neglect about him that bespoke no interference, no comfort from a caring presence in the house. A dyed-in-the-wool, live-alone bachelor. He was older than me, certainly, by a decade, maybe a decade and a half. His bulbous blue and red-veined nose was a telltale to his lifetime's fondness for the drink. He kept his hat on. Probably never took the greasy-looking thing off anyway. He kept his coat on, too, despite the cloying warmth of the bar. The greatcoat, reeking damp, of black wool hung like a drape from him, and, what with the hat tipped tight down to his eyebrows, he had a lofty, gaunt, Beckettian air about him. He had to be a man down from the mountain, I thought. Not too clever a hunch. There was sheep there in the mix of sense, and there's few sheep on the fertile lowlands of Tipperary. If he wasn't so blatantly angsty, I was thinking, I could have liked the man. Inwardly, I wryly reflected on the traces of my innate contempt of the man from the good lowlands for the struggler on the thin stony soils of the hills. I wondered vaguely if that was Norman Irish arrogance towards the native Irish after the big medieval land grab, or just a plain class thing. Like the most of us, the blood of both invader and native runs through the veins. And sure, we're all generally mixed up. Anyway, my silent, fleeting thoughts were calming me down. At least I didn't want to hit him anymore, though that nose of his was a tempting target. But as I took a good gulp of the brandy, he surprised me once again. "You have a story I want to hear." Astonished, I spluttered. "I have?" "Tell me about Cinderella." "What?" "The school play you were in, young fella." There he goes again. "How did you change from the dirty, skivvy Cinderella to the lovely blonde lassie in the big ball gown?" In the name of God, that was all of 60 years before. Absorbing his question, the different tone of it, its implied naivety, gave me an inkling of the gentleman beneath, and I began to warm to him. Memories swarmed in. Schoolboy days in the monastery when I was about 10. The smell of a turf fire, the buzzing hum of 24 boys rote learning, the stark black soutanes of the monks, who smelt of chalk, cigarettes, and sometimes drink. I remembered the hysterical hijinks in which I was a major player when they left us teacherless for a while, and the terrible retributions we were caught in the act. I was jerked back to the present by another question, aggression coming back into his tone. "Are you bloody well going to tell me or not?" I began to tell him what he wanted to hear before he went sour on me again. I started to describe the mechanics of the stagecraft as practiced in the play, or at least as I understood them at this far, far remove. But a more sensory memory was silently running parallel in my head. I was then, in the time of the story, a 10-year-old farmer's son. I was standing on a stool in a full-length ball gown with swishing layers of pink taffeta and tulle and sequins. Two ladies cooed and twittered as they nipped and tucked my dress into shape. Now, lest you think I was expressing some early pre-puberty fetish, I should tell you that I was forced into wearing that apparel. Well, maybe forced is a bit strong. I was more strongly enticed by a very persuasive more about him in a minute, Monk, into doing 3 things that, as a macho farm kid, I abhorred. Made to look like a girl, act on a stage, and sing in public. The last wasn't too bad, though. I had been known to answer, but not always, the age-old custom of the noble call to perform in family get-togethers. I was a good enough singer then. I sang to the cows whilst milking, and they didn't kick me. The gown was restrictive and prickly, and even with some sort of softer, long undergarment, irritated the life out of me. Normally short-trousered, t-shirted and sandalled, there I was, utterly uncomfortable, in a multi-layered, hooped contraption. I was topped off with a ringleted blonde wig, which was also prickly. This is what a crown of thorns must feel like, I thought. I worried. What would the girls say? The fellas in school? As it turned out, it was worse than I could have imagined. The first girls of my teenage pashes, post-play, dismissed me gigglingly. I go off at you now, Cinders. I did. I emigrated. Anyway, the aforementioned Monk, brother as we addressed them, was a rara avis, a right rare bird, a clerical teacher that didn't beat the daylights out of you. He was way before his time, a great teacher, an encourager, and he must indeed also have been a psychologist of rare talent, entirely to persuade me and the other rural ruffians to go on stage in a sissy play. And I was the brother's greatest achievement. I was to sing on stage, and horror of horrors, to sing some solo numbers. I remember one. Cinderella is my name, which of course you know. Hitting a high by soprano note thereabouts. But he had to fight to get me. I was, to say the least, reluctant. He called to my parents and elicited their support. I hadn't a chance after that. Sanctions were hinted at. No more tractor driving, etc. If. The change that my friend, yes, I was warming to him by now, at the bar wanted to know about was the transformation of the bedraggled kitchen maid into a beauty fit for a prince's party. How that was brought about, apparently in an instant, that was the man's question. The fairy godmother, today a venerable cattle dealer and father of 10, waved his her wand over me. There was a crashing sound effect and flash. The lights went down, making it completely pitch black on stage and in the hall. No health and safety nannyism then, I can tell you. The lights almost immediately went back on, and I was there, in the spotlight, in my golden crown of thorns and very glittering ball gown, nary a sign of my drab, shift, smudged face and limp, scruffy hair. And of course, then, my line. Oh, fairy godmother, how beautiful! It's wondrous! Our genius Monk engineered it all. He rehearsed us to death over it. My classmate assistants in the wings, dressed head to toe in black, closed their eyes 5 minutes before their cue, to give them night vision, you see. When the lights went out, they darted onto the stage, following fluorescent floor marks, and whilst some quickly undid the safety pins, no Velcro then, of my grubby servant's dress, uncovering the ball gown beneath, others fixed my curly golden wig in place. Others again wiped my face of the soot marks. None too gently, I remembered. They paid later. I stood there on my mark, immobile, with arms akimbo, all done in 7 seconds, but it must have seemed like just a blink to the audience, and certainly to my current interrogator. I told him all this. "We thought 'twas magic," he said. "Sure, we often talked about it. Couldn't work it out." Our Cinderella played for several nights in the local town hall, and in those pre-TV days was a total sellout. I suppose we were peddling a bit of magic. And, I just found out, we'd become a story ourselves in the process. Cinderella's transformation was not a story I thought I'd be telling that night, but sure, what harm. It was nice to remember it, kind of grounding, and good to answer the mountainy man's curiosity. At long last. It was also a good warmer-upper for the main performance. The nerves were all but gone. After I'd done the deed at the podium, I returned to my old friend at the bar. He was still on Guinness, but now followed by whisky chasers. I stood him a few. "You told them well," he said, and I was pleased. He then went on to tell me some fantastic stories. He was a true storyteller, a master. I was only in the tuppenny halfpenny place. The one about the flea-infested cabin on the mountain and the English visitor is but a small sample. Fleas with hind legs like JCBs, that a plough furrows up your back. They rode him across the mountain, and he didn't stop till he got to the Shannon. Didn't make sense, but it made you laugh, and you remembered it. But I think I at least partially made the grade. He had, after all, given me his imprimatur. You told them well. And I'll bet you anything, he turned me into a story. I could imagine him by his fireside on the mountain telling about me. Young fella, son of Stevie's. Stevie was a gas man. He could hold his drink. The young fella came to town one night to tell stories in a bar. He was good enough, and decent like his father. And he told me about magic and Cinderella. Here's how it goes. That's it now. Shinawell. Goodbye.